Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today is a Patreon request from Keith Bond. I'm talking about the debut album from Barker, Utility. Okay, this is a project from last year that passed under my radar. Almost exactly a year ago, actually. I remember people in my comments talking about this guy, and probably a few highlighted it as one of their favorite albums of the year, maybe. But I just didn't really give it a second thought at the time. And this request came in and I was given a chance to catch up on it. So yes, this is Sam Barker. Technically this is his debut album, though he was in an outfit called Barker and Baumecker that released 2 other albums before this, which I have not listened to. But yeah, this new album, Utility, is supposedly getting labeled under the genre of neo-trance. Which, not sure how much I want to take that label seriously. But this project is definitely at least trance-adjacent. It takes some fairly standard synth progressions you might find on, like, a techno or trance project from, like, the early mid-2000s or something. But with one little twist. No kick drums. There's still a clear pulse formed by all of these waves of synth layers on basically every track, but it does create a very different vibe that's going for something much more chill and subtle. The one thing useful about that neo-trance label that I saw on its Discogs page was that clicking on it led me to a recommendation to Lorenzo Senni, and seeing that I was like, oh yeah, this is kind of a similar idea to that Scacco Matto album I heard earlier this year. Another otherwise club-ready album, but given a much more experimental flair, almost entirely by removing all of the drum textures. Now, I didn't particularly care for that project when I was checking it out for that last Some Stuff I Missed. Something about it just didn't really come together or connect with me on a personal level, even if I could admit the idea behind it was pretty unique. And Utility definitely does this whole idea better than Scacco Matto did. It doesn't remove all drums like that one. There's still cymbals and hi-hats and other percussion occasionally. There is even technically some kicks, just, you know, not in the standard rhythms you usually find. And there are very few of them. But this album does at least seem to be, like, more aware of the overall effects such a muted percussion section would have on a project like this, and does a lot more work towards atmosphere building and creating a more uplifting and refreshing vibe all around. There's still some solid grooves here, but the otherwise much more chill vibes feel like they're using the lack of stronger percussion to its advantage. And even then, I could imagine adding the percussion back on a lot of these and getting a pretty dang propulsive and powerful trance ambient techno album that could also really work in that way. Maybe even better. Though it wouldn't be as unique if that were the case. Now, did I think this album was great? No. Very good, but I would not really say this knocked my socks off. Ultimately, I kind of found it to be a little on the inconsistent side. There were some moments on this project that did noticeably more for me than others. Some great moments, and other moments that, just kind of passed me by or didn't leave that strong an impression, didn't feel as well thought out. I don't know. Going down track by track, I will say pretty consistently my favorite track on here was the opener, Paradise Engineering. All these watery synth plucks and progressions building up this super chill and enveloping atmosphere with lots of rich layers of very nice melodies all around. Feels like being taken out to the ocean and watching waves crash on the shore. It was absolutely lovely. But contrast that with the 2 subsequent tracks, which didn't nearly land as strongly for me. Postmean basically stuck to one single chord, rhythmically wavering in and out of reality. It was a nice chord, but it didn't really have much dimensionality beyond that. That one was kind of forgettable. And then Experience Machines, with all its blurping organ synths and subtle squelching and constantly tapping hi-hats, made for a weirdly unsatisfying mix. This one in particular just felt like you took this fairly generic, stabby, minimal techno track and just cut out the kicks. Something about it didn't feel quite right, like it wasn't originally meant to be built this way, I don't know. Though, to be fair, I could probably say the same about following track, Gradients of Bliss, and I think that one turned out a lot better. All its whooshing and fuzzy but muted pads as they sound pulled out of like a Gabriel Lamar production. That guy very often crafts his dub techno in such a way where taking out the percussion can be encouraged. Very subtle, but definitely got its mood to come across. The next 3 tracks are also very trance-centric in similar ways, and it mostly comes down to whatever wavering melodic fragments are introduced and whether or not the track sticks with me. I will say the track Hedonic Treadmill was always one where I would look at my iPod and go, ooh, this one's nice. The progressions of pads in the background of that one really give that one some more dramatic heft. And very much the same deal with the title track on here. The chord progression on that one in particular was well done enough it carried most of the track, and would probably raise that one to second favorite cut on the album, I think. The track that comes in between them, Models of Well-Being, is just as refreshing and uplifting from a sonic perspective, but didn't feel as well developed like melodically. It felt a bit more monochromatic in one note than those two. Still definitely good, just it didn't stick out as much to me. Then after an inconsequential ambient interlude and Wireheading, which didn't really add anything, we get our big epic 9-minute closer, Diehards of the Darwinian Order, which is actually pretty weird for a closer. Doesn't really sound much like any of the other tracks here. A lot of this track is focused around these strange metallic textures, which sound like giant thin metal sheets being wobbled inside out and back, ringing out like gongs. There are technically kick drums on this one, but they're also like mostly in halftime and a few other spots. And as we go on, the length is better justified as the mix is filled out with these really dramatic and dark progressions of wiry pads, and later all these ride cymbals to make the groove really feel like it had some momentum. It's a strangely disorienting track and a weird way to close this album out. I've gone back and forth whether or not I consider it a favorite, since it almost seems a little out of place and its appeal feels pretty different from the majority of the rest of the album. But I do certainly appreciate its inclusion and find it to be a generally satisfying experience and an interesting inclusion that helps give the whole album that bit more dimensionality. As a whole, I got a lot of mixed thoughts on Utility. Like I said, there are parts I really like on it, but there are parts that just kind of fall flat for me. It's pretty sonically cohesive, but also kind of all over the place from a personal enjoyment level. I'd probably be lying if I said I saw myself keeping this around long term. I think had I not been requested this directly on Patreon and it had caught my interest enough elsewhere, then it would just get shoved on the next Some Stuff I Missed. But I'd also be lying if I said I got nothing out of it either, that it didn't generally come out of the experience enjoying myself. The good moments on here are still really good, really put together some intriguing atmosphere, and I do find the project fairly interesting as like a proof of concept for this style of ambient trance with little to no kicks, and keeping all these grooves so spare and stripped down. Well, not like it's the first to try the idea. Like I said, Gabriel Lamar's been doing this kind of stuff for quite a while now. But Barker did definitely establish more of his own identity in this lane. There may be moments on this album where the lack of drums feels more like a gimmick than something the tracks were really built specifically around, but there are other moments where Barker got these ideas to really work effectively. And there are probably more good moments on here than bad ones. Maybe next time he puts something out, he can finesse these ideas into something that works more holistically and maybe has some stronger tunes, I don't know, but yeah. I'm probably not going to hang on to this, but I thought it was pretty good. I'm glad I sat down with it. It's worth a shot if you're curious. I'm overall feeling a 7.3 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. Shout out to my Patreon supporters. They're awesome people. You want to add yourself to that list or make me review something, link to my Patreon is in the description. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.